Hi everyone, welcome to Terror at Twilight with Miss Cheryl. Tonight's reading is going to be Night Voice from Roberta Simpson Brown. Help me please, I'm hungry. The voice came faintly to camp through the darkness. It was the second time Adam Quimbley had heard it, but tonight he wasn't going to do what he'd done last night. Last night when the voice called, he'd run from his cabin and told the counselors. They had listened, but they had assured him they heard nothing at all. He could still hear the voice. Surely they could too. When he insisted that someone was calling for help, they laughed at him and told him to go back to bed and stop being a baby. At breakfast, they told the whole camp about Adam's night voice, and everybody teased him for the rest of the day. After humiliation, Adam was never going to give them an opportunity to make fun of him again. He tried to sleep, but the eerie sound continued. Help me, please, I'm hungry. Adam pulled the covers tighter to shut out the voice, but he was unsuccessful. I'm hungry, please, help me, it called again, somewhere close to camp. Scott Ashley came up to the next bunk. Scott Ashley sat up in the next bunk. What was that, he whispered. Probably some jerk trying to tease me again about last night, said Adam. Scott turned on his flashlight. Adam could see that his eyes looked big and round and frightened. Is that what you heard last night? Scott asked. Exactly, said Adam. Scott turned on his flashlight. Adam could see that his eyes looked big and round and frightened. Is that what you heard last night? Scott asked. Exactly, said Adam. Do you know who that sounds like? Scott whispered in an awe-stricken voice. No, replied Adam. Who? It sounds like Ralph King, Scott answered. He had your bunk last year. All he thought about was eating. He stole most of the food my mom sent me from home. Sounds like a nerd, said Adam. Yeah, said Scott. Nobody liked him, but nobody wanted anything really bad to happen to him. Wasn't that the boy who got lost in the cave? Inquired Adam, sitting up. Yeah, said Scott, but he didn't exactly get lost. A little shiver went unexpectedly up Adam's spine, and he pulled his blanket around his shoulders. What happened? He asked Scott. It's hard to say for sure, said Scott. 2 of the counselors took some of us on a night hike through the cave. They gave us a long rope to hold on to. We were supposed to stay together in a single line, but Ralph turned loose of the rope and climbed up on the big rock. The counselor saw him and told him to come down, and it looked like he started to. He turned toward us, and then he was just gone. It didn't look like he fell. It looked like the rock just gobbled him up. Something must have snatched him. It happened so fast, we couldn't tell. We got out of there as fast as we could. Didn't you look for him? Asked Adam. Well, sure, said Scott. Of course we did. And we had help from the police and other people, but we couldn't find a hole behind the rock. We couldn't see anything. It must have been awful, said Adam. It was, Scott agreed. We heard this crunching. Well, then his body vanished, but when we never did hear it hit the bottom, we could hear him screaming at first, but that didn't last long. He called and called, but he never made another sound. I guess he was already dead by then. I sure hate to have to stay in that cave forever like poor Ralph. You mean they never got his body out? Adam asked, surprised by his morbid information. No, said Scott, there was no trace of him. Adam made no comment. Both boys sat thinking about the horror of being lost in a cave like poor Ralph King. The ghostly voice broke the silence again. Help me, please, I'm hungry. Adam and Scott looked at each other and shivered. It sounded so pitiful. I tell you, it sounds just like him, said Scott. I've been thinking, said Adam. What if he didn't die? What? Asked Scott, startled by the suggestion. What if he managed to survive somehow, said Adam. That's impossible, exclaimed Scott. Even if he survived the fall, he would have starved to death by now. Maybe he ate raw fish or his own arm or something, suggested Adam. They laughed, picturing a boy gnawing on his own arm. I've read stories about things like this, Adam went on. From what I hear of Ralph, he'd be searching for something to munch on. Scott had become serious again. No way, he said. If you had heard that crunching and that scream, you know he couldn't look for food. Then how do you explain the voice? Asked Adam. I can't, said Scott. Maybe it's his ghost. Hunger can make people do weird things, said Adam. Dead people don't get hungry, declared Scott. They don't call for help either, said Adam. It sounds to me like he's alive. Maybe you're right, Scott conceded. We're not just hearing things. There is definitely somebody out there calling. The voice came again as if on cue. Help me, please. I'm hungry. It's coming from the direction of the cave, said Scott. I think we ought to tell the counselors. No, Adam insisted. They'd just laugh again. They couldn't do anything that we couldn't do. Maybe we should just forget the whole thing and get some sleep. Before they could pull up the covers, the voice came again through the darkness, more urgent than ever. Please, help me. I need something to eat. The boys crept to the door and listened. Please, the voice called louder. Adam turned to Scott. Get dressed, he told him. We've got to find out where that voice is coming from. Scott hesitated. Come on, urged Adam. You've got to show me where Ralph disappeared in that cave. I don't think that's a good idea, Scott protested. What if you were out there calling, asked Adam. Wouldn't you want somebody to help you? Well, yes, said Scott, but I think we should take somebody with us. There's no time, said Adam. Hurry. The boys pulled on their clothes, grabbed their flashlights, and headed towards the cave. The voice kept calling at intervals. As they walked down the trail, they could hear it more clearly. There was no doubt now that it was coming from inside the cave. Has all of this cave been explored, asked Adam. I doubt it, said Scott. Nobody even knew about it until a few years ago. Some big rocks had always sealed the entrance. One day they fell off in this storm or anything, and there was an entrance to the cave. How big is it? Adam wanted to know. I don't know, said Scott. We didn't get to go very far. The part we were in was like a big room. There was this huge rock sticking out from the side. It was the one Ralph climbed on. What did the rock look like? Quizzed Adam. I never saw one like it before, Scott answered. Our lights that night made it look like a scaly monster. Adam shuddered. He wasn't too sure he wanted to see it after all, but it was too late to turn back. They continued down the trail without talking. They soon reached the entrance and stopped. The voice spoke at once as if they knew they were right there. Help me, please, I'm hungry. Adam and Scott shined their flashlight inside the cave entrance. The walls were smooth with strange markings, but nothing moved. Cautiously, they stepped inside and looked around. Which way do you go that night? Whispered Adam. That way, Scott whispered back, pointing straight ahead. Shining their lights in front of them, they walked only a short distance before Scott stopped. There it is, he said. They were standing in front of a massive rock beside the passageway. It did appear scaly in the dim light, but Adam could detect no opening. Are you sure that's where Ralph fell? Asked Adam. As Scott nodded his head, the voice boomed from behind the rock. I'm hungry! The boys nearly dropped their lights as they jumped back and collided. The voice was so near that they half expected Ralph King to come climbing out of the crevice. Adam regained his composure and stepped closer to the rock. He put one foot against it and pushed it. Second, it seemed secure. He would have stepped up on it, but Scott yanked him back. Are you nuts? He said. That's what Ralph did. Oh, right, said Adam. It looks safe enough, though. I guess that's what Ralph thought, Scott reminded him, but look what happened. Adam thought for a moment. He examined the rock and then turned to Scott. Here, hold my light, he said. I want to try something. What are you going to do? Asked Scott. I'm going to climb up and lie on my stomach so I won't lose my balance and fall. I think I can stretch far enough to see if there's an opening behind the rock. Be careful, Scott cautioned. There's something strange here. Adam climbed up and lay down. Scott directed the light on him. As he inched his way along the rock to the spot where Ralph had vanished, something scraped like rocks rubbing together. Ralph! Adam called. Are you down there? His own words echoed back to him, but no other voice spoke, not even Scott's. Adam looked back at Scott to double-check the location, but Scott was staring with horror beyond Adam. Adam whirled and looked in the same direction, but it was too late. The rock he was lying on was opening. Jagged teeth lined both sides, and a deep purple tongue shot from below, wrapping itself around Adam in a flash before he could move, and it pulled him down. Adam began to scream, and the rock snapped shut. Scott heard the same crunching sound he heard the year before coming from the rock. He turned and ran from the cave, waving both flashlights and screaming for the counselors. He tried to shut out the sounds that followed him. Inside the cave, a voice in the night burped and breathed a sigh of satisfaction. Thank you. I hope you enjoyed that. Take care. Have a good night. Bye.
Hi, tonight's terror is going to come from the collection Tiny Nightmares. Our story will be Fingers by Rachel Hung. The villagers lived atop houses perched on high wooden stilts, the land by the sea being soft and shifting as it was. That, at least, was the official reason for the stilts. Yet the children often suffered the unpleasant sensation of having one leg sink knee-deep into the squelching, bubbling mud. As they were pulling their legs out, they'd feel it, gentle fingers wrapping around their plump, sun-browned calves. They'd shriek and jerk their legs out more quickly, and the fingers would slip away. Parents dismissed these rumors, citing sea glass, mud skippers, and trapped pockets of air as possible culprits for what the children insisted were fingers. But the children saw how their parents scrutinized the earth as they went about their daily chores. They noticed new designated areas marked with orange tape tied to little metal sticks driven into the ground. Once an area was designated, it was off to limits. Soon the orange tape was everywhere. It resembled a twisting, winding maze. One might be obliged to take a circular route across the entire village just to get to their neighbor's house. It got to the point where everyone added an extra half hour to any journey they had to take. Still, the parents would not admit that the situation was dire. They would go about their daily activities with new vigor and often jogged from one place to another in order to make up for the time lost caused by the orange tape. The children decided that something had to be done. If their parents would not face the fearsome truth lurking beneath their very feet, then they would. On the appointed night, at the appointed hour, they stole out of their houses. Little shadows came from everywhere in the village, weaving through bushes and trees and orange tape, all headed to the oldest, deepest mud spot in town, one of the first ever designated areas. In their arms, the children carried bedsheets, ragged towels, strips of gunny sacks, old, tattered shampoo bottoms. They worked quickly, twisting each item into a rope and tying them together. The moonlight that shone down on them gave a pallor to their hands, and their fingers appeared a ghostly white as they knotted and pulled. They looped the rope around the waist of the strongest boy in the village, and then the waist of the next strongest boy, and then the next, and then the next, until all the children were strung together, and then they tied the end of the rope to one of the sturdy stilts of a nearby house. The idea being that the first boy would lower himself into the mud, allow the fingers to wrap themselves around his calves, but then, instead of jerking away, let them take hold of him. Once the creature had its grip, the boy would plunge his hands into the mud and grab the fingers around his legs. With their collective strength, they would pull the creature out of their hiding. Several of the children from fishing families had snuck nets from their father's boats and would have these at the ready for when the monster emerged. It would be then up to the children of the butchers and the fishmongers. In their hands glinted their parents' sharpest knives stolen from busy kitchens and market stalls earlier that day. The children checked the ropes, the nets, the knives. Everything was ready. They watched as the strongest boy stepped one foot over the orange tape, then the other. Nothing happened at first, and they thought perhaps the patch had dried over, become regular solid ground. But then he began to sink, the mud sending up soft burks around him. He held his arms out high above his head as he sank, as if getting into position for his mother to undress him before bed. When When he had sunk thigh deep, his face changed, and the children knew that the fingers were creeping across his skin. The boy grimaced, his eyes widened, but being brave as he was, he stayed put, sinking deeper and deeper into the mud. The children waited for the signal. When the mud was up to his hips, the boy plunged his arms into the ground as planned, grabbing the creature that had its grip on him. "Pull!" he shouted, and the children pulled. The boy began to emerge from the mud, but as his body inched out of the earth, birds rose from the bushes and the trees around them began to sway. A strange rushing noise filled the air, a noise that sounded like the night itself was whispering a warning, and yet the children kept pulling, their hearts full of bravery and best of intentions. "Pull!" he shouted again. Now the ground began to shake, and the moon itself, so bright, so perfectly round, began to tremble in the sky. The children kept pulling. The boy's knees could now be seen. "Pull!" It was then that the trees began to sink into the ground, their ancient twisting trunks slipping lower and lower into the earth, yet still the children pulled. Finally, the boy's hands were visible, as were his calves, and around them were the fingers of the creature. Except what he thought were fingers were in fact thick vines with tendrils protruding from their length, all firmly wrapped around the boy's feet and hands. Roots, the boy realized. The children stared in wonder, little hands growing slack on the rope. Then the trees pulled back. Again, the ground and sky shook. Again, the air was filled with a strange whispering. But this time, it wasn't the trees that were sinking. It was the children. First, the boy in the mud disappeared, his glossy black hair vanishing beneath the mud like an exotic plant submersed in soil. Then, the next strongest boy tied to him on the rope was drawn, kicking and screaming, into the earth. Then the next child, and the next. They tried to pull back, but it was no use. The trees were stronger than them, of course they were. Child after child disappeared into the ground. Their wet, gurgling cries awakened the parents and drawing them out of their houses. When they saw what was happening, the parents tried to grab onto the children, but were also drawn inexorably into the earth. The trees kept pulling still. The rope of bed sheets and towels proved fatal. Eventually, the last child was sucked into the ground, and along with her, the last parent. Now the night was quiet. Only the wind in the trees and the dull crash of waves was to be heard, until the stilts of the houses to which the children had tied themselves began to creak. A high, keening noise like the cry of an injured bird. The creak ended in a snap that brought the house to its knees, pulling it too into the earth. The trees didn't stop until all the houses were gone, all the fences, all the wheelbarrows, all the clothes, carefully strung out to dry earlier that day. When it was over, nothing remained to suggest that a village had ever been there at all, except for one mossy corner beneath an old tree, where protruding from the earth was a piece of muddy orange tape. The end. Well, hopefully, the next time you feel fingers pulling on your legs from bed, you don't pull back. Thanks for watching. Bye.